In this chapter, we're going to look how to insert the really big buttonholes, and we're going to put those horizontal. So what's the difference between putting in a horizontal and vertical button? Not much actually, only that it's a much bigger button. So you want to put your button on so that you have a gap of 0.5 centimeters from the top and the side. That's where the button needs to sit, and then you mark the center of the button so that you know where it actually needs to sit, so it doesn't end up sitting over the edge somewhere, you know. And on the waist seam I do exactly the same, 0.5 centimeters, and then I mark the center of the button, which in this case is like 2 centimeters up, right? So it doesn't matter what I tell you here, you need to measure that. And you put your button on 0.5 centimeters off the edges, and that gives you the perfect look, right? So I mark that. And now I know I'm only going to put one more button on, right? So I measure it, and then I need to divide it by 2 because I get 2 spaces, right? And then I know where to mark my button, and I've done that here, and that's basically it. It's hunky-dory. Now, when you come to the buttons which sit on the yoke, you'll have the same again, that optically it looks tighter there than it actually is. So when I put it on where I wanted it to be and then measured the distances, I found it was about 45 millimeters more than the distance here, right? So optically it always looks a bit closer even though it isn't. So I would go by what looks optically right and then measure that out. The distance shouldn't be more than 5 millimeters, you know, for that, but it can be that. So just go with what your eye tells you, I think, in that case, because it's more important that it looks right than that it is right. And now we've marked them all, super duper, we can go onto the sewing machine. Now the one thing that is slightly different here is that now on the yoke, it's not very obvious which direction the foot has to sit, right? Because the lower end of the yoke and the upper end of the yoke run different directions. So you want to be parallel to the waist if you have a uni fabric, which means it's just the one color, right? So in that case, I line up my buttonholes with the waist, and make very sure you don't accidentally touch the sensor, because this sensor is so sensitive that it just stops going the moment it touches a little bit of fabric maybe, or you touch it by accident because you're arranging the whole thing. And I had it twice on this. I was really annoyed because it didn't listen to my own advice. Like I always say, if in doubt that you've touched it, turn off the machine and just put in buttonhole again, because it's so annoying. And 2 times I did it. So when you go over here and you have maybe gathered the waist, you have even more fabric there. So any of the fabric, it just pops up, touches it, and there you've had it. The sensor will do like half a buttonhole or stop at the top or whatever. So make sure that you then just start the buttonhole again, turn the machine off, put it back in, and then start sewing. This is not an issue at all in the bodice. It's all really nice and flat, so when you move that one up, you know, you won't have an issue. But especially where you have got a bulk of fabric to your left, be very, very careful. And the last one. So you can see how easy that was. Now, I do want to show you what happens when you do it with check material, which I did for little Victoria, because it's slightly different. And again, it's not always what's right. You have to do what looks right. And of course, when you have a check material, you can't go parallel to the waist. You go in line with a check. The other thing is, if you haven't used any interlining, you can't possibly do a horizontal buttonhole without inserting an extra piece, which I did. I just cut me a little rectangle, I serged all the way around, and then I attached that to yoke so that I would have more than just that one single layer, which no doubt will rip out. Here, when you have interlining, or whether you decided to line it or whatever, then you don't need to do it. But if you have just the one layer, you absolutely must just put a piece underneath it if you do the horizontal buttonholes, if you do like the really big ones. If you do smaller buttons, you'll have them vertical anyway, and this is not an issue. So my pin doesn't get in the way. What I do is I secure it with some thread. And I do that both sides because I don't want it to fold over. There's nothing worse than unpicking buttonholes, especially when you use really expensive Dupion silk and you don't want it to rip, because my, oh my, the dress is finished and then you have a disaster. Not good. So I did that, and then I sewed in my buttonhole. And what you can see here now is what I was just saying about the direction of the buttonhole. Let's turn this over. I went with my square instead of with the waistline. Although it would have been correcter to go with the waistline, it would have looked wrong and wonky. So you have to go with what looks good. Here, just as a comparison, the white one again, here it's parallel with my waistline and looks absolutely fine. If you have any questions to do with buttonholes, don't hesitate to ask. I'm here to help. So I see you soon again for another project. Bye.